The lock clicked and refused to turn. At first, Alex thought it was a glitch. Maybe a delay in the firmware sync, maybe a hiccup in the app. He tapped the screen again, then again. Nothing. His phone just stared back at him with a blank interface, his security system's control panel grayed out as if the house itself had ghosted him. He pulled out his keycard. It used to hum softly when held near the smart sensor. Now dead. No response. A pit began to open in his stomach. He leaned in closer, eyes narrowing. That was not his lock. That was not his system. The brushed metal panel he had designed, custom installed, and fine-tuned for 4 years had been ripped out. Replaced. With a crude, rust-rimmed, off-the-shelf deadbolt. The kind you'd find on the back of a dollar store restroom door. And taped, no, slapped, onto the center of the door was a single piece of printer paper, crumpled slightly on the edge. Letterhead, Homeowners Association. Title, Notice of Access Revocation. Reason, multiple violations. No specifics. No dates. No process. Just a unilateral declaration. You no longer belong. Alex stood there motionless as the suburban afternoon buzzed around him. A lawn mower droned in the distance. Sprinklers ticked mechanically on the lawn next door. And from across the street, blinds shifted. A shadow moved. Someone was watching. But no one came out. No one said a word. It wasn't just a lock. It wasn't just a paper. It was an act of control. Someone had entered his home, while he was gone. Someone had disabled and removed a proprietary system he designed for high-security clients, including government contractors. And they had the audacity to do it during the day. Like it was normal. Like it was allowed. He already knew who it was. There was only one person in the neighborhood with both the ego and the performative righteousness to orchestrate something this absurd, Karen Whitmore. Head of the HOA board. Self-appointed defender of suburban aesthetics. And longtime hater of Alex's existence. He didn't shout. He didn't pound on the door or call the police in a panic. That would have been playing into the image Karen had probably already painted of him. A difficult man, resistant to community standards, obsessed with tech and control. No, Alex was something else entirely. He was methodical, and above all, patient. He turned and walked back to his car without a word, sat inside, and stared at the dashboard for a moment, breathing slow and deliberate. Then he opened his laptop. It was almost funny. Almost. Because of all people in this neighborhood, Karen had picked him. The man who built digital fortresses for a living. Who understood attack vectors, social engineering, forensic recovery. Who had, on more than one occasion, helped law enforcement track cybercriminals through metadata hidden in corrupted log files. She thought she could outmaneuver him with a sheet of paper and a hardware store lock. Fine. Let the game begin. First move, visibility. His house was down. But not blind. Every external camera he'd installed had dual pathways. If one feed failed, the other backed it up to an encrypted server offsite. The main app was disabled, but he hadn't built it to be the only access point. Within minutes, he was inside the raw server logs. There it was, a full-angle view from his planner cam. Time-stamped, crystal clear. Karen in a floral blouse and wedge heels, standing on his front porch with a man in a generic white van. She gestured like she owned the place. Spoke into her phone, waved her hand toward the door. The man, contractor or accomplice, didn't matter. Removed the smart lock unit with a flathead screwdriver. No gloves. Amateur. Then he installed the janky metal deadbolt while Karen looked on. She even said audibly, "Make it look legal enough so he doesn't have a case." The microphone inside the doorbell caught it all. Alex chuckled softly. She really had no idea. Next step, containment. He called Miguel, his oldest friend, and the only person in the city he trusted without question. "I might need your couch tonight," he said calmly. "The HOA broke into my house." Miguel paused. "You serious?" "Very." He didn't explain more. Didn't need to. Miguel just said, "Come over. I'll order Thai." That night, while eating drunken noodles and sipping cold beer, Alex mapped out the full perimeter of his counteraction strategy. Not just legal. Not just technical. Narrative. Because Karen wasn't just attacking his property. She was building a story, an illusion of righteousness cloaked in regulation. To win, Alex couldn't just disprove her actions. He had to dismantle her myth. The image she projected at every meeting, protector of neighborhood harmony, keeper of rules, pillar of tradition. That image was brittle, and brittle things crack under pressure. The next morning, Alex returned to the street. He didn't park in front of his house. He parked around the block, walked calmly with a backpack, and crouched by a planter near his front steps. He placed a small device, no bigger than a garden sensor, beneath the mulch. It looked like a weed monitor. In truth, it was a directional antenna, part of a covert system he'd been refining for months. Able to detect wireless interference, map device movement, and even identify MAC addresses from low-range intrusions. He didn't need to brute force entry. He just needed them to try again. Because when someone thinks they've won, they get sloppy. And when someone like Karen believes she's in charge, she starts to push farther. And push too far. As he walked away from the house, he made a mental list. Everything she had touched. Everything she had claimed. And most importantly, everything she had overlooked. The architectural approval forms he filed 3 years ago for his tech cabinet. The bylaws that limited external modifications, but said nothing about non-visible structures. The HOA vote requirements for emergency enforcement. The domain logs for internal board communication. Alex had receipts. Karen, he suspected, had only bravado. Back at the cafe, Alex opened a shared document titled Operation Gatekeeper. That name had started as a joke between him and Miguel years ago, when they talked about what they'd do if the HOA ever went too far. Now it was a framework. A real one. He categorized everything: legal violations, digital forensics, narrative leverage, witnesses, evidence, media. For every section, he dropped in data, links, timestamps, screenshots. He wasn't documenting to defend himself. He was building a case to prosecute her behavior in the court of public consequence. By 3 p.m., he had already received his first anonymous message. "Hey, I heard what happened. Just so you know, we never voted on anything. Karen said it was an emergency action. But we never even had a meeting. No name." But he didn't need one. The pattern had begun. The lock may have turned against him once. But the real door, the one Karen thought she'd slammed shut, was just beginning to creak back open. And what lay on the other side wasn't just retaliation. It was reclamation. Alex was no longer trying to get back in. He was preparing to take everything she thought she owned and expose it to the light. Alex didn't return home that night. He knew better. The battle ahead wasn't about reclaiming his house in haste. It was about exposing the rot inside the HOA's carefully staged facade. He slept lightly on Miguel's couch, laptop on his chest, surrounded by notes, screenshots, and audio clips that hummed with potential. The air in the apartment buzzed, not just from the ceiling fan overhead, but from the rising charge of strategy being set in motion. At dawn, he brewed coffee with the same calm as he had before the storm. This time, the calm wasn't routine. It was chosen. A calculated pause before the next precise strike. The trap had been laid the day before with the discreet antenna in the planter. But now, Alex needed to bait it further. Karen wouldn't resist meddling again. That was her flaw. Power gave her not just arrogance, but addiction. She needed to win visibly, repeatedly. She needed to feel superior. So Alex gave her a new toy. By mid-morning, he uploaded a decoy version of his home control dashboard to a spoofed server. It looked legitimate: real interface, dummy status updates, false vulnerabilities seeded carefully into the code. The domain was deliberately mislabeled in subtle ways, things only someone nosy and half-competent would spot. And they would assume they were smarter for spotting it. He called it the sandbox. And then he waited. While the bait was out, Alex went deeper into the HOA's infrastructure. Karen had been aggressive, but she had also been careless. During her unauthorized entry, she had inadvertently disrupted the Wi-Fi mesh he'd hidden within the garden lights. That spike of interference had already given him a new lead. The signal pinged from a tablet, non-standard, outdated firmware, and traced to a known MAC prefix often used in budget Android devices. Sloppy gear. Cheap. Impulsive. Probably Dylan, her son. Dylan Whitmore, the half-grown man-child who lived rent-free in Karen's house and occasionally appeared at community events in mismatched suits, trying to look important. He had once tried to convince Alex that over-the-air firewalls were a good idea. Alex remembered smiling politely and walking away. Now it looked like Dylan was playing hacker. That suited Alex perfectly. Sloppy actors left deep digital footprints. Later that day, Alex returned to the neighborhood under the guise of a jog. Not the sweaty, sprinted kind. A smooth, measured pace with a ball cap pulled low and smart glasses that recorded everything. He passed his own house without a glance, then veered onto Sycamore Lane, where Karen lived. Her car was in the driveway. Dylan's too. A folded stepladder leaned against the porch. An empty coffee cup rested on the hood of the sedan. Small details, but they meant something. They were active, moving around, probably coordinating whatever narrative they were building. Alex didn't stop. He jogged on. But the glasses captured it all. When he returned to Miguel's, a new ping was waiting. The sandbox had been accessed. Not just once, but repeatedly. Someone had tried dictionary-based password injections on it. The system flagged a script called access_override.js. It wasn't even obfuscated. A pre-written override routine lifted from some amateur hacking forum. The attacker's IP was familiar. HOA Clubhouse. Again. Alex leaned back and grinned. She was poking the bear without realizing she was inside its mouth. The honeypot had not only recorded IP data, but also keystroke behavior, erratic, inconsistent, panicked. Like someone flailing for control they didn't have. But the final stroke was more elegant than he could have planned. The attacker opened a file labeled ho_ac_codes.txt. It was an obvious trap, and they took it. Downloading it triggered an embedded location ping. Seconds later, Alex had the exact coordinates of the device, the back office of the HOA clubhouse. Again, he logged everything, timestamped, encrypted, cross-referenced. This was no longer just trespassing. It was attempted cyber intrusion. And they had no clue they were walking into a federal classification of digital tampering. He called Riley that afternoon, his former classmate who now ran a cybersecurity consultancy in Chicago. Riley was blunt and brilliant and had zero tolerance for amateurs pretending to be threats. When Alex gave him the summary, Riley burst into laughter. You mean she forged the domain and then used a recycled tablet to run override scripts on your sandbox? Bro, I'm in. I'll run a trace on the domain logs, look for any WHOS anomalies, then I'll scrape her server if I can locate one. Just send me the packet dump. Already uploading, Alex replied, attaching the zipped file. You're going to enjoy this. Riley's voice dropped into a pleased tone. Give me until tonight. I'll get you a full forensic trace. Pro bono. Just for the drama. While Riley worked, Alex began another front of his campaign, community exposure. He designed a flyer, simple, powerful, and damning. It asked one question. Do you know what your HOA board is really doing? Below it, a private link to a public folder. Evidence, documents, vote logs, footage, and full context. But he didn't distribute it like a gossip blog. He printed a single copy and pinned it on the bulletin board outside the community clubhouse, right next to the weekly landscaping updates and lost pet flyers. He didn't sign it. No fanfare. Just quiet presence. Predictably, someone took it down within the hour. But not before it was seen. He received 3 access notifications within 15 minutes. 2 from anonymous proxies, 1 from an IP tied to Lindsay, one of the quieter board members. Minutes later, an unknown number texted. I didn't vote for anything. She's lying to all of us. That was enough. The walls were cracking. That night, another ping. This time, a different device connected to the honeypot. This one was labeled K.Whitmore_iPad. It ran through the tabs with determination, opening every section of the decoy dashboard. She was looking for something incriminating, something she could flip. She clicked a file labeled resident_surveillance_plans.pdf. That triggered an audio routine. The device's microphone activated, and Alex's code recorded everything. It caught her voice, muttering to someone nearby. This will shut him up. If we frame it as a safety threat, the board will back us. She said it, out loud. Into a live mic. Alex didn't smile this time. He sat still. Processing. That audio clip, combined with the footage, the access logs, the forgery trail, was no longer circumstantial. It was direct admission. By morning, Riley sent the full trace. The spoofed vote emails were even sloppier than Alex imagined. 2 accounts ended in .info domains and had been registered 3 weeks earlier using a free service. The kicker? The recovery emails for both accounts were the same one Karen used for her grocery app. Riley laughed so hard, he had to stop and breathe. She's using a coupon account as a recovery email for fraudulent HOA credentials. That's sitcom-level dumb. Alex uploaded the forensic report into a new folder labeled Phase 2 Systemic Fraud. By noon, he was ready for confrontation. But he didn't storm in. He walked quietly into the clubhouse during open hours, asking to see the minutes from the meeting that authorized his lockout. Lindsay was there, nervous. She handed him a folder, loose papers filled with vague language about resident safety and visual uniformity. Nowhere did it name Alex. Nowhere did it authorize property modification. He looked up. Did you vote to lock me out? She hesitated, then shook her head. I didn't even know it happened until after. That was confirmation. Karen hadn't just bullied people, she'd excluded them from process entirely. Alex left, walked across the lot to the bulletin board again. Nothing about emergency policies. No vote announcements. No documentation. Just pastel flyers about lawn trimming and an Easter event. As he walked back to his car, Mr. Halverson, the retired engineer 2 doors down, waved him over. She pulled the same stunt on my wife last year, he said quietly. Claimed her garden fence was out of spec. We got fined. When we appealed, the paperwork was gone. She fined us again for excessive appeal behavior. I didn't know how to fight it. Alex nodded slowly. You just did. That evening, he activated the final layer of the trap. A cloned access point labeled HOA_controlnet appeared briefly near his home. It mimicked vulnerability. And someone connected. Again. And again. The logs stacked up. Within hours, he had fingerprinted every device Karen or Dylan had used in the past week. By the time the sun set, Alex wasn't chasing their mistakes anymore. He was mapping their entire playbook. The war had begun with a lock. But now it wasn't about locks. It was about who held the keys, and what they had done with them. The morning was quiet, but it felt staged. The kind of silence that only comes after something has cracked, but hasn't shattered yet. Alex knew the rhythm by now. Chaos didn't explode, it leaked, slow and systematic, through the cracks of bad planning and worse cover-ups. And this morning, the silence meant Karen was scrambling, not reacting, but spinning. Because if there was one thing she understood better than power, it was illusion. But illusions, like corrupted files, don't hold under scrutiny. And Alex was ready to corrupt hers completely. He had spent the previous night organizing his digital case folders into something more dangerous than a report, a story. Not for court, not yet, but for people, for perception. Truth was only one half of power. The other was presentation. And Alex had both now. He had started with the forensics, the emails, the spoofed votes, the overwritten logs, the fake domains, the audio clip of Karen whispering her fabricated justification. But now it was time to go further. To uncover not just what Karen had done, but how far she'd been willing to go to build her fantasy of authority. He sat at his temporary desk in Miguel's guest bedroom, sipping lukewarm coffee, scanning through the HOA's digital archive, which he had legally scraped the night before using a URL bypass hidden in the bylaws section. What he found wasn't just technical sloppiness, it was an ecosystem of manipulation. Archived PDFs of past violations issued to residents, half of them unsigned, most of them referencing imaginary rules. Fines for fence color tones, citations for unmowed grass based on outdated weather logs, warnings about decorative excessiveness without photographic proof. But the most damning was a violation letter template buried inside a zip file labeled 2023 HOA Templates Final. It included placeholders like insert resident name and choose infraction, surveillance/cabinet/decor/lawn/etc. The system wasn't broken. It was customized to punish. That changed the game. Alex drafted a new document, a clean timeline, annotated with timestamps, citations, and screen captures. He titled it the Karen Doctrine, a pattern of manufactured control. It wasn't subtle. That was intentional. At 11:12 a.m., he received a call from Riley. "You're gonna love this," Riley said. "Guess who bought surveillance software with a government discount code?" Alex paused. "Karen?" "Not directly. Dylan. But he used credentials tied to a civic development nonprofit he interned for 5 years ago. The purchase was processed under a temporary alias that expires in 3 weeks. That's impersonation of a federal beneficiary. I flagged it for escalation." Alex exhaled slowly. "Send me the receipt. I'll route it to legal." "Already in your inbox," Riley said, then added, "You want to win a chess match, but this is checkers. They're not even playing your game." Alex smiled faintly. "That's the point. They don't know there's another board." By early afternoon, Alex returned to the neighborhood, this time with his attorney and a compliance officer from the county housing department. They didn't knock. They walked directly into the HOA clubhouse during posted business hours. Karen was mid-conversation with another board member when she saw them. Her face didn't fall. It collapsed. The lawyer handed her a sealed document with a cover page titled, "Preliminary Investigation into Alleged HOA Misconduct, Forgery, and Unlawful Entry." She opened it with trembling fingers. The compliance officer was curt. "Effective immediately, you are suspended from all administrative activity pending review." Karen tried to object. "This is a misunderstanding." "Not anymore," the officer replied. Alex said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence around him did the speaking. Every footstep echoed in the hollow clubhouse. Every second that passed was one step closer to full exposure. That night, back at Miguel's, Alex queued a mass email for scheduled delivery at exactly 7 p.m., prime time for idle inbox checking. The subject line, "What you deserve to know." Inside, a structured narrative, the video stills, the audio clips, the domain records, the false violations, the script that Dylan tried to run, the timeline, and the names. All footnoted, all irrefutable. Within minutes, the neighborhood erupted, not with noise, but with forwarded messages, replies, calls. Alex watched it unfold from the quiet of his screen. One by one, the residents began to connect the dots. A woman from 3 houses down emailed, saying Karen had once cited her for having wind chimes that were excessively melodic. A couple near the park shared photos of a permit delay that lasted 5 months after refusing to join Karen's pet project. Someone else posted in the community group chat, "Remember when she said cameras weren't allowed? Turns out hers are still mounted on every corner of her house." The dominoes didn't fall. They rolled downhill. The next morning, the inspector returned. This time with backup. They walked through the HOA office like surgeons through an exposed wound. Improper storage, unregulated equipment, files marked as policy drafts, with logos that didn't match official documentation. One folder, labeled Emergency Lockout Protocols, contained copies of the exact fake notices Alex had found taped to his door. The rest of the board denied ever seeing them. Karen was absent. Her house dark. Her phone off. But it didn't matter. The system had flipped. It wasn't Karen's HOA anymore. It wasn't even an HOA at all. It was a ghost town of exposed paperwork and residents realizing they'd been conned by decorum. By noon, the board convened an emergency vote. It didn't take long. Karen was removed officially, stripped of all duties. But Alex didn't celebrate. Not yet. He filed a civil lawsuit 2 days later, not for money but for discovery. Because only through the courts could he access every hidden message, every deleted email, every digital footprint that Karen and Dylan thought they had buried. The complaint included unlawful entry, digital fraud, defamation, and invasion of privacy. That was the trap, not the lawsuit, the discovery. Through it, he could subpoena devices, search histories, even metadata from communication apps. And once entered into public record, the evidence couldn't be buried, not by apology, not by politics. When the court hearing began, Karen appeared with a new lawyer, one who looked fresh out of law school and very much unprepared for the storm ahead. Alex played one clip. Just one. Karen's voice sang. We'll say it was a safety threat. The judge stopped the session midway and ordered full proceedings to move forward under potential criminal scrutiny. Afterward, Alex didn't gloat. He walked past Karen in the hallway and didn't even look at her. She didn't speak, didn't raise her clipboard. Just sat there, smaller now, like someone who had mistaken control for strength and now couldn't tell the difference between the two. That evening, Alex sat on Miguel's balcony as the sun dipped beneath the skyline. He didn't check his inbox. He didn't scroll the replies. He just breathed. The wind carried the scent of jasmine and asphalt. Behind him, the final copies of his legal report printed slowly. Each page not a weapon, but a key. And every key was opening something that had been locked for far too long. Not just his door, but his place. His right to belong without permission. His right to exist without being managed. Karen had changed the locks. But now, Alex was changing the terms. And there would be no door she could close that he couldn't unlock. By the time Monday rolled in, the neighborhood looked different. Not physically, but atmospherically. The air felt more awake, more aware, like a collective pause had turned into silent anticipation. People didn't wave as quickly, and conversations quieted when Alex walked by. Not out of fear or guilt, but because something fundamental had shifted. Everyone knew it now. The illusion was broken. Karen's reign, once so confident and untouchable, was unraveling thread by thread, not with a bang, but with evidence. And now, Alex wasn't the outlier. He was the reckoning. But reckoning, he understood, wasn't about destruction. It was about clarity. About rebuilding something cleaner from the ashes. And clarity required more than exposure. It required documentation, process, formality. So Alex shifted focus. The civil suit had triggered a legal wave, but he knew from experience that systems didn't change just because the truth surfaced. They changed when people acted on it. So he made a decision he hadn't considered until now, to consult with the residents, not just as the guy who cracked the case, but as someone who could help them protect their own rights going forward. He didn't want power, but he could give power structure. That morning, he walked to the newly scheduled HOA gathering, clipboard in hand, not as a symbol of control, but of intent. The room inside the temporary meeting space, hastily organized in the library's community center, was full. Some residents looked at him with admiration. Others with curiosity. No one looked away. Mrs. Jenkins, a retired school principal with a presence of quiet steel, stood at the front with a microphone and called the meeting to order. We're not here to replace a tyrant with another, she said. We're here to understand what failed and fix it together. Alex sat off to the side, watching, listening, taking notes. When the time came for open discussion, he stood up, not with prepared remarks, but with a memory. I moved here 4 years ago, he said, voice calm, steady. Because I wanted quiet, a space where systems worked. Not where I had to be one. A few chuckles broke the tension. But systems break when we stop asking who wrote the rules, and why we trust them. Karen didn't just forge documents. She forged assumptions. That people wouldn't ask. That you'd comply, not question. He paused. We don't fix that with revenge. We fix it with transparency, redundancy, and participation. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was agreement, unsaid but felt. After the meeting, Mrs. Jenkins pulled Alex aside. Would you consider running for board chair? He shook his head immediately. That's not where I'm useful, he said. But I'll build you a system. One that can't be gamed. Over the next few days, Alex met with former board members, residents, legal advisors, and digital infrastructure consultants. He helped design a new governance portal, public, immutable, real-time. Any vote now required dual-factor approval and automatic timestamping via third-party verification. Violation letters would need to be accompanied by photographic evidence, stored publicly for community review. All documents would be accessible to residents with a personal login and audit history. It wasn't just a tech upgrade. It was structural accountability. While the new HOA platform launched, Karen retreated further into her home. Her once pristine yard now showed signs of neglect. Weeds pushing through cracks, overgrown hedges, a sprinkler head broken and sputtering in the driveway like a severed limb. Alex walked past one morning and saw a notice posted on her own door. A formal request to remove unpermitted surveillance equipment. The irony almost made him smile. Almost. But there was still work to do. The civil case was progressing, and Discovery had begun turning up more damning materials. Drafts of violation letters with targeted names filled in weeks before infractions occurred, notes between Karen and Dylan about nuisance residents, and receipts for the bulk purchase of generic lock hardware ordered months in advance under a dummy LLC linked to Dylan's gaming alias. One particular file caught Alex's attention, a voice memo transcribed by the forensics team in which Karen said, "If we can't make him move, we'll make him miserable." That became the official subtitle of the final filing. Meanwhile, the state HOA Compliance Bureau, alerted by Alex's attorney, had opened its own investigation. Karen was now the subject of multiple inquiries: local civil liability, state-level administrative abuse, and federal scrutiny over misuse of digital credentials. Dylan had left town weeks earlier. No forwarding address. No responses. Just silence, which said more than any denial could. At the same time, word about Alex's case had spread beyond the neighborhood. Other communities began reaching out. Small enclaves, condo associations, gated developments, all asking the same thing. How did you do it? How do we protect ourselves from the people meant to represent us? Alex answered with frameworks, checklists, principles. Not noise. Not outrage. Systems. By the end of the month, the new HOA board held its first official vote on major reform. It passed unanimously. Alex wasn't at the table, but his system was. The infrastructure he'd built now kept everyone honest, not out of fear but through design. That was the point. And the best part, he was free again. No court dates. No meetings. No retaliation cycles. Just mornings with coffee and Pixel curled on the windowsill, watching the world go by quietly. Until one afternoon, Mrs. Jenkins appeared at his doorstep with a basket of cookies and a letter. Inside was a certificate, honorary advisor to the board. No voting rights. No administrative duties. Just recognition. "You don't need to accept it," she said. "But we felt you should know. You didn't just fix a problem. You showed us how to prevent it." That evening, Alex pinned the letter to his wall, not as a trophy but as a reminder. That systems weren't the enemy. Unchecked systems were. Karen had tried to rewrite the rules in secret. Alex rewrote them in the open. She had built a fortress of illusion. He had replaced it with glass. And the only thing clearer than the view now was the fact that every door he walked through from here on out would open because he had earned it, not because someone allowed him to. Spring edged into summer quietly, like a whispered apology after a storm. The neighborhood began to hum again, but this time with something lighter in the air. Where once tension lived, now curiosity crept in. Porches saw chairs instead of citations, laughter replaced tight glances, and people who used to avoid eye contact were now exchanging recipes over fences. Alex observed it all from a distance, not as a leader, not as a symbol, but as a man finally allowed to exist without surveillance. Yet even as the visible fabric of the neighborhood mended, the real reckoning continued elsewhere. In courtrooms, inboxes, and quiet conversations between lawyers, investigators, and compliance officers. The civil suit had cracked something far bigger than Alex originally anticipated. During discovery, his legal team uncovered email threads between Karen and a handful of former board members that went beyond HOA matters. They revealed plans to influence minor permit approvals, pressure vendors to prioritize preferred homes, and even suppress resident-led initiatives by withholding vote counts. These weren't isolated abuses. They were systemic manipulations woven into the daily operations of what was supposed to be a representative council. But what elevated the situation from concerning to criminal was the discovery of a shared drive labeled Net Internal. Inside were altered architectural approvals, forged timestamps from board meetings that had never occurred, and a series of draft statements prepared to justify pre-written violation letters before they were ever issued. It was manufacturing governance like reality TV, but with real consequences. The final straw came when a data audit connected Karen's personal devices to a third-party surveillance tool purchased using a nonprofit educational grant code. The tools were intended for civic research in underfunded school districts. Dylan had accessed them using expired credentials and repurposed them to run traffic scans on neighbors' private Wi-Fi networks. That single action escalated the case to the district attorney's office. Federal data misuse. Fraudulent identity usage. Unlawful access to private infrastructure. These weren't HOA-level violations anymore. These were prosecutable crimes. On the day of the preliminary criminal hearing, the courthouse was quiet, but the atmosphere was tense with unsaid expectation. Karen arrived in a muted navy pantsuit, no clipboard, no entourage, just a lawyer who looked like he was regretting every missed vacation in his career. Alex, by contrast, wore no suit. Just a clean shirt, slacks, and the calm of someone who had nothing left to prove. When asked if he had opening evidence, he stepped forward, inserted a flash drive, and played the same audio clip that had unraveled everything. Karen's voice, low and casual, saying, "We'll say it was a safety threat," followed by specific instructions to disable Alex's system. The judge paused the playback halfway through, turned to Karen's counsel, and simply said, "You'll need to prepare for discovery review. This is moving forward." Alex didn't look at Karen. Not when she entered, not when she sat, not when she left. He didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any defense. That evening, Alex returned home to find a handwritten note in his mailbox from a resident named Clara, who he'd only spoken to once before. It read, "You didn't just take back your door. You opened one for all of us." Inside was a photo of her garden, newly replanted, free of the HOA's once mandated symmetry. 2 pink flamingos stood proudly in the mulch. Alex smiled. He pinned the note on the inside of his pantry door, next to the certificate Mrs. Jenkins had given him. By midsummer, the new HOA board was not just functioning, it was thriving. The resident portal that Alex helped design now included real-time financial transparency, a proposal submission forum, and an appeals panel moderated by rotating community members. No one feared opening a letter from the board anymore. And perhaps more surprisingly, people started volunteering, offering ideas for beautification, proposing changes to outdated rules, even organizing social events. The neighborhood didn't just recover, it re-engaged. And Alex, true to his word, remained out of office but ever present. He was occasionally spotted answering questions at board workshops, helping an elderly neighbor set up a VPN, or walking pixel past the park with a relaxed posture no one had ever seen on him before. There were no more hidden cameras and flower pots. Not because the tools were gone, but because they were no longer needed. Trust had returned, not through speeches or apologies, but through systems and behavior. Meanwhile, Karen's trial date was set for late fall. In the months leading up to it, more information surfaced. One former contractor came forward to admit that he had been paid off the books to swap out multiple smart devices in Alex's and other homes under Karen's orders. Another revealed that Dylan had asked him to install discrete signal repeaters near the clubhouse, supposedly for neighborhood Wi-Fi improvements. Both testimonies were entered into the official record. As the stack of evidence grew, so did the list of residents submitting statements about past abuses, retroactive fines, surveillance intimidation, vote manipulation. One elderly couple said Karen had once fined them for hosting their grandson's birthday party without pre-approval of noise variance. It had been a Tuesday afternoon with 10 guests. Their violation had been issued with a photo of a single balloon taped to their mailbox. Alex's legal team, with Riley's ongoing forensic input, presented the final case summary in a sealed motion that included 112 pages of documented missteps, for gigabytes of trace data, and a closing note from Alex himself that read, "This was never about a lock. It was about the keys we didn't know had been taken from us." The district attorney's office used that line in their press release when they formally confirmed charges: document forgery, misuse of surveillance equipment, digital intrusion, and criminal impersonation of a civic entity. On the day the final ruling came, Alex stayed home. He didn't need a verdict to feel closure. It had arrived months ago in the form of neighbors planting sunflowers, children playing on sidewalks once deemed cluttered, and the gentle breeze of a street finally free of tension. That afternoon, he installed the final upgrade to his security system, a sleek, voice-activated facial recognition panel hidden in the trim beside his door. It greeted him quietly with a single phrase, "Welcome home, Alex." He paused before stepping in, looked once more down the street, and let out a slow breath. It wasn't just a system welcoming him anymore. It was the neighborhood. And this time, it wasn't because they feared him or pitied him or needed him. It was because he had reminded them that silence in the face of control wasn't peace, it was surrender. And that the real locks worth breaking weren't on doors, but on minds. As dusk painted the sky in slow amber strokes, a small group of kids rode by on scooters, one of them waving as they passed. Alex waved back. The door clicked shut behind him, not as a warning, but as a promise. No one would break again.